America, what the actual fuck, 2016. This is our last podcast before the November election.
Unless the elections are canceled forever.
Yeah, well, they might. Who the fuck knows what's going to happen at this point? Seriously, I cannot believe my goddamn eyes. This has been a crazy couple of months.
Eyes, ears, the whole sensorama of the American election's been pretty unpleasant, to say the least.
Yes.
Disgusting, I could go so far as to say. Yeah.
Exquisite clusterfuckery, I think, would be good.
There is no expletive strong enough, clear enough, or short enough to really get through in an hour. So we're going to try to bumble our way through what the hell is even going on down there. Because honestly, it makes less and less sense every single day at this point.
Yeah, I actually thought... I mean, fuck me, right? Hindsight is 20/20, but I thought this was going to be a fairly straightforward election. I thought that Trump would be able to easily exploit all of Clinton's very obvious flaws and just keep his shit together enough to probably eke out a victory. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but I really underestimated the I don't even have words to describe Donald Trump, and just the fact that he is unadulterated human refuse. He is a walking obscenity. He's
like a piece of styrofoam that washed up on a beach, all salty and gross and, bad for the environment around it.
Yeah. Everything he touches turns to shit. And, if it was even before all of these sexual assault allegations and things, him saying obscene sexual things, and...
There are now, about a half a dozen of these. There's...
Even before that, I thought this was insane, and now it just keeps getting crazier.
I thought he was going to do... here's my pre-debates, several months ago, when I last seriously considered this and kind of... I got sick of it again. I've gotten sick of this election about 6 or 7 times now, and then eventually you kind of just go away for a couple of weeks, and then you come back, and it's like, oh, something new, and it almost felt several times like the election was going to turn and become something better for quite a while, but it's just gotten worse. And several months ago, I was like, okay, Clinton is infamously bad at debates. She's very bad at acting like a human, really awkward at best. And Trump's whole thing is his charisma and his ability to just sort of stir up people's emotions and dissatisfaction with the American establishment.
Yeah.
And in a debate, I was like, well, that works in a debate, and all of Clinton's benefits don't work in an actual debate. And therefore, I figured, the first debate we'll finally see Trump plausibly pull ahead. When in fact... He, at least in the first debate, as far as I'm concerned, he acted like as much of a normal person as he could manage.
Which wasn't really that normal.
No.
He was a complete asshole. Just so rude. I thought that...
Yeah, but it was more like a normal rudeness. Like someone who is just sincerely dismissive of the people around him, as opposed to his... the classic Trump of being rude in like a flamboyant and insane sort of way, where you almost can't quite tell... if he's making some kind of meta point about something, like he's just talking, like he talks about Clinton like she is the government already.
Yeah.
When we all know she isn't. She's not the president yet. So why are you acting like everything is already her fault?
He just short circuits everything. And I think that this is one of the reasons why, even in spite of everything that he said and everything that's happened, he's still polling at a good, 40+% of support, which is its own form of insanity, but that's a other discussion.
Yeah, no, he's around 39 now.
Hillary Clinton might as well be the president. She's just part of the establishment. She's part of the government. She's one of those people up there. And so he can make these really broad points and not really say anything specific or even sensical, but his supporters know, at least think they know what he means. He's good at phrasing things in a way that a vast swaths of the American public can relate to on an emotional level,
Oh, I agree. But I mean, okay, a lot of Trump's support is coming from states that had, for instance, Kansas is a Trump state right now, for the most part. And it was a state in which Bernie Sanders supporters were more popular, more successful than either Trump or Clinton or anyone else in that state.
Right.
And so you have the same people who were, I think, supporting Sanders for primarily anti-establishment reasons. You know, there was appeals to these broad ideas or things that could happen that, you know, might have happened. But realistically, it was just a sense that the way America's run right now, you know, lobbyists need to be gotten rid of.
Yeah.
Government needs to be more open and not done sort of these backroom deals. Politicians need to be basically just regular people again, if they ever were. But, you know, in principle, that's what they're appealing to. This sort of a re-democratization of the American political system. And that's the healthy, nice way of describing it, because the flip side of that, those same desires can be funneled into a kind of a right-wing populism as opposed to this left-wing populism of Sanders.
Yeah.
And the populism stuff is still what draws a lot of people in, the sense of that those fuckers in Washington, those guys, we need to screw them over.
Yeah. There's a sense of just anger at the way of doing things, and
wouldn't it screw them over to elect Trump? Wouldn't it piss off all of those assholes in Washington to have Trump as president?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. If you're looking at this from the point of view of kind of a frustrated helplessness, why not vote for Trump? At least he'll be a massive pain in their ass, too.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of his support is coming from. Although, I wouldn't reduce it down to that. Trump is, as I think we'll touch on later in more detail, Trump is a symptom to a bigger, deeper problem in American society, right? American society is in a sort of crisis right now. There's a lot of turmoil, a lot of changes, and there's also a lot of massive economic problems still since 2008. And I think that's really the core of what's driving all of this madness, is that people are desperate and they're searching for answers, you know, and they know that the status quo is going to fuck them over. And so they are looking for anyone other than someone exactly like Hillary Clinton to
the kind of the pedigreed person who can proudly describe their 30 years of, you know, service to this country, slowly working her way up the rungs of power, eventually getting to the presidency through force of, you know, influence and connections
and manipulation. Yeah.
Well, sure, and just a general sense that, hey, you know, doesn't she deserve it? Right? I mean, the most quote unquote most qualified person. That's usually what that's, as far as I'm concerned. Being qualified to be president is just a euphemism for saying the most deserving. The person who deserves to be president, who should be the president.
I think, and I hate to agree with Trump supporters about anything, but if there's one thing I agree with them on, it's that, you know, Hillary is an elite, and she herself does kind of think that she deserves it, like it's her turn to be president.
Well, it is. That's how this usually works. You have the two most, vetted people in the two most vetted parties. Eventually sort of rising to the top, and then they duke it out sort of almost symbolically for their parties, and then one of them happens to become president and one of them doesn't. And that's it. Instead, in this case, that whole process, because of just how dissatisfied people are, has kind of just become derailed over and over again.
Yeah, and, you know, I think that this is a really interesting election for the Democrats, and in the sense that, like, one thing the Democrats always do that I hate them for is whenever they're given some sort of criticism of, Hillary Clinton, you know, you have a lot of skeletons in the closet and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Their response is, yeah, well, what about do you want the Republicans to lead the country? I mean, look at Trump. He's a monster. Oh, do you blah, blah, blah. They always deflect criticism to the Republicans as a sort of sidestep to avoid actually answering up to their faults. And they do that constantly. And so usually that's worked for them, you know? Yep. Are you going to vote for the Republicans? Yeah, they're insane. So, but now I think that there's the working class doesn't have the same faith in the Democratic Party that they have had in generations past. I think that with the destruction and the crumbling of labor unions over the last 30 years, I think that the Democratic Party has in some way become the sort of smug liberal elites that the right-wingers criticize them for being.
I think they are. I think it's even worse than that. I mean, it would be one thing just to say they're a bunch of smug assholes, and I agree. I mean, watching that first debate particularly, I mean, the way Clinton acted, I was like,
she was such an asshole.
I want to see her lose, and there's no real reason for that, 'cause she hasn't said anything objectionable, but just the way she acts,
her demeanor,
like, this is a complete waste of my time. I shouldn't even be here. I should just be president already. Yeah. I'm just fucking spinning my wheels, waiting for this circus to end so that the real business of government, which none of you idiots need to see, can get done with. And I'm just here because, this is just sort of a ceremonial thing, basically.
That is exactly how it felt,
and I agree that's a massive annoying problem. But on the other hand, I think it's not just that they're elitist and that's irritating, although it is. It's that elitism is exactly what has funneled people into these really reprehensible alternatives.
Yeah, exactly.
That people look at that and go, instead of, the appeal usually is vote for these well-established, well-entrenched people because they will protect democracy. Yeah. They're using democracy, an appeal to elections, an appeal to these positions to legitimize their essentially sort of elitist, disjointed rule over people. And instead of it legitimizing it, it's basically worked in the opposite direction, where they've delegitimized democracy and elections and political parties.
Yeah.
Because people go, well, if this is how our system works, then I don't like the system as a whole.
Yeah, and so they end up supporting someone like Trump, who's just anything but.
Yeah.
And I think that Trump's...
He's like a wrecking ball. He's like he's like a hand grenade. You just throw him into the White House and he'll just wreck up the place. The White House and Washington, D.C. won't be able to handle him, not because he's a strong leader, but because he's erratic. And he's a politician who can't be bought. Yeah. Not because he won't take a bribe, but because he literally can't stay bought.
Yeah.
It's just, you can't trust him to stay on your side. And because of that, I think he's really got I think that sort of that situation has been what has attracted people to him from the beginning. I mean, particularly when he was running in the primaries, where that was exactly his whole point. I'm not one of these jerks who just parrots the same couple phrases over and over again, trying to get your vote.
I think now, though, that there is something different about the Trump movement where, to some, in its own way, it is speaking to working class concerns in a way that the Democrats are no longer capable of doing, because they've basically completely abandoned the working class of America, and they've signed all these fucking trade deals like NAFTA, and you have Obama supporting the TPP. And the Democrats have just been anti-worker in general for the last generation, and now people actually have what they perceive to be an alternative to that. So the Democrats can't just say, well, do you want the Republicans? On the other hand, Trump is a fucking obscenity.
Yeah, I don't think he's better. It's not like the Republicans have accidentally got a really even remotely progressive person involved. I mean, Trump could have been, I guess. I mean, he could have said primarily exactly what he had said to get to where he is now, and simply, as an addendum on all of that, had a bunch of progressive notions that he was going to do. When I get into government, I'm going to make sure healthcare is there for everybody, or I'm going to put an end to, systemic unemployment, or I'm going to keep, get Wall Street under control, or whatever. Like, there was a bunch of, populist rhetorical things he could have said and could have made a central plank of his thing, except he went in the opposite direction and just doubled down on the right-wing populism and was like, nope, build a wall, anti-immigrants, anti-Muslim, anti-blah, blah, blah, which I think is the reason why he's losing now. Because if he had disingenuously swung to the left, I think he could easily be killing Clinton in the polls now.
Yeah, you're probably right. Jesus, every 4 years, every time there's an election, there's always this swath of Americans that rant on the internet and say, well, if candidate X wins, then I'm moving to Canada. And it happens every single time. And this might be the election where people actually do.
Yeah, because, I mean, well, okay, so we go back to George Bush versus Al Gore, right?
Yeah.
Nobody cared at the time. George Bush was just an idiot. 2004, George Bush is, Mr. War on Terror, and people really don't like him then.
Yeah.
And that was when this whole sort of, this crap started.
I'm moving to Canada.
Yeah, I'm moving to Canada. But even then, it was like, maybe, if you had money and you already had a citizenship here, well, then you might move. If you could, work from home or whatever. Like, if it was really just a matter of moving to your second house anyway, I'm sure some people did, but it didn't seem like it was anything more than a couple of blog posts and articles that people wrote sort of rhetorically complaining about Bush or the Republicans indirectly.
Yeah.
And then with Barack Obama, it was all just sort of racist nonsense.
Republicans that didn't actually understand what Canada was like.
Yeah, we're like, well, they're whiter than we are. Let's just move there.
That's snow, right? That means white people.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and the same thing also happened during when same-sex marriage was federally recognized.
Yeah.
And of course, all the people that were threatening to move to Canada didn't realize that we had legalized gay marriage 10 fucking years ago. But anyway, I actually know 2 Americans that are actually moving to Canada, regardless of Trump or Hillary wins.
In this case, though, I think there is a difference between a lot of the people who would talk about it then, as opposed to it being a purely partisan, cudgel just to sort of swing around and be like, I'm going to move to Canada because George Bush sucks, or I'm going to move to Canada because, Barack Obama's a Kenyan. That kind of nonsense.
Right.
This is more like, I'm going to move to Canada because our political system does not function properly. Period.
Right.
Doesn't matter who you're voting for. Doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't even really matter so much who wins. This is such a clusterfuck of just bad things happening. Because let's face it, Trump is just one guy. There will be more. There will be other candidates. There will be someone after Trump. There will be a Clinton after Clinton. There will be a Trump after Trump, and there's no reason why that will change.
Yeah, I think this election isn't a one-off. I think this is a symptom of American society sort of slowly splitting apart at the seams.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a bit grandiose, but sure, I think that this is part of sort of that ongoing disintegration of both the political system and just society in general. Like that these systems that are supposed to be there to be kind of a nice reinforcing buttress against the problems of the world are themselves the weak point now.
A lot of the bigots on the Trump supporter side are reacting to the fact that they're not allowed to openly ridicule gays and black people anymore without being called out for it by someone. And
what a fucking shame.
And they complain about SJWs and all that bullshit.
Well, it's a lot of this is but I think an internet election, yeah.
But I think that it's not just about society breaking down and white people being angry that they can't be bigots anymore. Like, that's part of it. But there's a reason why little things like that are bothering people who support Trump. And I think it's a symptom of the breakdown in the economy. So I think it's a really bad sign.
Maybe.
What did you think of the debates, Mac? What were your thoughts?
You know what? The first one was a shocker. I was going into it thinking, okay, Trump's behind in the polls, as he's basically been pretty much all of the time, right? Everyone says Clinton sucks, but hey, Trump sucks more, so what are you going to do? Might as well vote for Kodos. Anyway. What did I think of the debates? The first one was surprising how boring Trump was. Not that he was less rude or more polite or more presidential or political or thoughtful or anything, but just that he took all of the energy and just it was sapped away somehow. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he had a hangover. Doesn't really matter.
He was sniffling a lot,
yeah,
which he fervently denied.
Yeah, people pointed that out.
What sniffles? I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know. The second one too, but I think that's just how he talks. I guess I really haven't watched a lot of them, to be honest.
I can think of a few reasons why someone would be sniffling a lot.
Honestly, if he was sick, that's fine. If he was doing cocaine the night before, that humanizes him in a way very few things actually have in this election, and honestly, it makes me feel more for him as a person and as a candidate than otherwise.
As though he were a real person.
Yeah, as though he has, the kind of person who would be worried about a debate the night before or whatever. But in any event, he was boring as toast, as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. The post-debate polls showed that Clinton just pulled slightly further ahead, and Trump fell several points behind or whatever.
Even though Clinton looked like a massive asshole during the entire thing.
She didn't say anything interesting. Clinton was not exactly thoughtful either. It was more of just Trump being boring and Clinton being a mannequin, and both of them trying to see who would flinch first, basically, was the first debate. As it turns out, in the second debate, it was Trump who flinched first, almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
As it turns out. I don't want to make too much light of this, but it is pretty fucking ridiculous how this has gone, to be honest. The fact that, none of the people Trump was running against ever knew about any of this stuff, had released it, like back in the primaries. I mean, obviously the DNC, thanks to WikiLeaks, we now know the DNC basically knew about all this stuff like a year ago and have been just sort of holding on to it as a silver bullet just to kill his presidency ever since.
I can't really blame them for that. I would do the same.
No, I wouldn't do it either, but it does sort of put the lie to the notion that the Democratic Party is the party of, ideas and decent discourse or whatever.
Yeah.
They were structuring this whole thing in such a way that it would benefit them electorally. Their concerns weren't based on, how do we have the best debate of ideas, but how do we kill our opponent in the most humiliating and effective way possible.
Yeah, and, I thought that on the second debate, which made me, the whole time I was viewing Donald Trump as like a tall baby in a suit.
It was like a fucking daytime TV show.
It was a dog and pony show.
It was like just watching one of those things where it's like, whose child is it kind of fucking soap opera-y bullshit. Like, even 10 years ago, you said these horrible things. What do you have to say about that? And he's like, well, that's not who I am anymore. I'm a different man. I'm a changed man. Although he didn't even really say it that interestingly.
I thought that Anderson Cooper and his colleague actually a decent job of moderating because hold on, hear me out. Because he did call them out when they were interrupting, like when Trump was interrupting Clinton.
They should just cut their mics off. Really.
I think so too. But he also called out the audience when they were being twats and like wasting time and applauding. But the thing I didn't like was just the questions that they were asking the candidates. It had nothing to do with policy or what their administration would look like or what they want to do in the world. It was like, oh, Hillary in your emails. Oh, Trump, you said you'd grab women's pussies and blah blah blah. It was like,
they went straight from that. But the worst part for me was they went straight from Trump. What do you say to the statement that you made 10 years ago that you grab women's pussies and sexually molest them and get away with it because you're a celebrity and important and they can't stop you? They talked about that for like 3 minutes and then just, brick walled that straight into another question on just, what's your opinion on Obamacare, basically.
Yeah.
Like, no real, no even attempt at even dealing with the disgusting issues brought up. Like, not even, you could talk about, decorum and politeness and woe is us for this the state of affairs and all that crap, but realistically whatever the issues brought up, they should just be dealt with to the finish, right? Like this is a problem. We'll talk about this for enough time as it takes to just at least deal with it. Like, what is actually at issue here?
Yeah,
they didn't talk about, the implications of these comments 10 years ago. They didn't talk about whether it would matter to the presidency at all. Clinton didn't say, she implied that this is not the kind of person you want as president. But that doesn't really mean anything, considering that we've had presidents who have done exactly those sorts of things before. And they've been perfectly fine presidents.
I thought that Hillary Clinton did an okay job.
The second one was way better. In
the second one, she did an okay job of trying to bring it back to what she wanted to do as president. But on the other hand, whenever she says, announces policies or things she's going to do, it always seems to be this like sort of just fluff. of like vagueness that doesn't. It's always like there's no real specific numbers. There's no real specific ideology behind what she's doing.
Not even a philosophy, God.
Or philosophy.
Nothing.
It's just, and she can't even really articulate why she's running for president to begin with.
Well, she can. She articulated it just as well as Trump did. They both have clearly identified why they're running.
She says that, we're better together. Blah, blah, blah.
No, that's boilerplate.
No, but that's what I mean. That's the only shit that they're able to articulate.
They both have articulated the primary reason why anyone should vote for either of them. And it is fairly straightforward, and they've mentioned it pretty much in every single speech they've given. You need to vote for me to keep the other guy out. What happens if I lose? Trump wins, or Clinton wins, depending on the speech. But basically, that's it. It's, if you don't vote for me, the establishment wins, and we get another 8 years of slow, grinding poverty death for middle America or whatever.
Right.
And if you vote for Trump, it's, the next morning he's just going to be drinking vodka and fucking
launching nukes.
Not launching nukes at whoever Russia tells him to launch nukes at, or whatever the Democrats have been pretending he will do.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically, fear on both sides.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to it, but that's at least the one substantive thing. And it is true. And it's one thing I think that, it's the one thing any politician can promise. If you elect me, the other guy will lose.
It's looking, in spite of how we both predicted this election would go, it's seeming more and more that Trump is not likely going to win. Do you think there is still a realistic path to victory for him?
Maybe. I think if he does not do something, here's the thing. I think there are words he is capable of saying in a debate that could win him this election.
Yeah, I agree.
So from that standpoint, I think there is it's not like there's this ossified voting blocks that just won't move that much before the election. So I think there is at least a possibility there. And I, at least in my own mind, could imagine things he could say that could potentially win him the presidency. I'm sure plenty of people could come up with 100 better things he could be saying in the debates than he actually has.
Right.
But realistically, I think it's quite unlikely that he'll actually do that. I think he'll just end up doing pretty much what he did in the second one, which is a bunch of damage control, probably regarding whatever the Democratic Party decides to release just before the last debate.
I also think
they'll put out
that
some horrible recording that they've been sort of keeping in their back pocket for the last year, and that'll be what the last debate's about. So they don't have to worry about Trump doing something creative.
Or even discussing specific policy themselves.
They don't have to worry about it.
But, there was one moment during the last debate that I thought that to me especially, revealed the way that Trump thinks. And I don't think that... I agree that Trump is capable, he can say things that will win him the election. He could do it. And the moment, the little window that I saw into Trump's brain was when he was talking about Clinton, quote, acid washing, unquote, her emails. And so, here's the thing. So, when Clinton was trying to scrub her email server and or her tech guy was trying to delete shit and get rid of it.
Yeah, after he got advice off of Reddit.
Yes, he used a program called BleachBit. Anyway, BleachBit is just your standard, free program that you would use on a Linux operating system to get rid of this sort of data.
Yeah.
So he reads BleachBit, and he's a man of the 80s. He was ragging on Japan.
I know what Bleach is, yeah.
Yeah. And so the way that he reinterpreted this was that she acid washed the emails. Acid washed, and then he goes to say she acid washed them. She had a very expensive process.
It's not, but yeah. Okay.
Well, no, the program is free, right?
No,
and so
also
you get the connection that I'm making though, that he took the word BleachBit and came from that derived acid washed and expensive.
I wouldn't be surprised if he was looking at this and assuming that, and this is the thing I think a lot of people, not just Trump, but a lot of people in general will assume when it comes to not just technology, but what politicians do in general, that they will, if it's as serious an issue as it becomes, they'll use the most serious solution, which generally is the most expensive one. This is a problem, a scandal that might affect the president of the United States. Obviously, Hillary Clinton wouldn't have just done some half-ass cleanup job. She didn't just get some guy who just downloaded the cheapest, freest software and just pressed a button and
which is literally what happened.
It's gone.
That is what.
I know, but that's what actually happens. I think Trump, at least, and then maybe this is just his sort of naivete or whatever, but he seems to always assume that there's a grand plan to anything that's happened.
Right.
And particularly when it comes to, Satan herself, obviously Clinton would have used the best ping pong tiddliest thing to super clean, double wash her hardware drives or whatever.
Only a man from the 80s would use the term acid wash, for fuck's sake.
I think it's a good idea. If he's trying to get some kind of, hashtaggy sort of
acid
attempt.
wash is what you do to jeans 30 years ago, not what you do to emails. Fuck. Anyways,
I'm just mad because it's related to computers, that's all.
You shut your goddamn mouth. I think that Trump could have a path to victory if...
Oh, yeah, look at those maps. Come on.
Could make a substantive difference. One is very low voter turnout, which I think is a very low... It's a very realistic possibility. Because I think that of the 9% of Americans that participated in the primary process and picked literally the two worst candidates that either side could barf up, I think that it's not going to inspire a lot of turnout. In spite of all this, the Republicans might win, the Democrats might win, kind of shit that always happens. And number two is, and by the way, a low voter turnout typically benefits Republicans.
Sure, and especially with, before you go on to the next thing, especially with Hillary Clinton pulling well ahead, where a lot of people, where it's neck and neck, everyone's all, third parties might kill Clinton's candidacy, which means they have to keep pretending Trump's a realistic possibility at all times.
Right.
Even though right now, being 7% ahead basically would, under any other circumstances, just be our campaign's done, let's just go home and eat some donuts and just watch TV for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah. I also think that if there is a terrorist attack on American soil... No, I'm serious.
Fine, but come on. At this point, it's what would Trump need to have? Yeah, okay, yes. And if California sunk into the sea and all those people just died, yes, he might have a chance of winning as well. But when we're talking about how a candidate wins an election, acts of God, terrorism, natural disasters, your opponent having a heart attack and dying are generally not seen as realistic paths to victory.
I would think that the Republicans would probably benefit more from the reaction that the American people would have towards a terrorist attack. And when I say that, I don't... let's remember that when one former drug addict shot a guard on Parliament Hill in Ottawa a few years ago, the government was able to make the public perceive that this was an Islamic attack on Canadian soil, So it doesn't have to be a really massive incident. I just think that usually the backlash towards what is perceived as Islamic violence usually benefits the right wing.
But would it benefit Trump, though? Because he's not perceived as better at dealing with terrorism than Clinton is.
You should ask his supporters that.
Well, I'm talking about the general public. I'm talking about polling that's been coming out. He is consistently behind on every issue now.
Yeah, but I think that he could be perceived as stronger than Clinton.
Well, sure, but that would take a change beforehand, wouldn't it? If Clinton is seen now as stronger against terrorists, wouldn't a terrorist attack help her more?
I don't know. I hope we don't find out.
Well, sure. And once again, I'll say that I don't think a terrorist attack is realistic. The Trump candidacy is going, well, let's just cross our fingers and hope that something awful happens, and you just happen to accidentally be seen as a better choice because of it. The usual technique is to look at states and try to actually win votes. But that, of course, for Trump is kind of an unrealistic goal.
Yeah, but I think that if there is an incident before the election, that's going to feed the backlash against immigrants and Muslims in the United States. Idea. And the Republican Party is the party of bigotry, so... I think that it would increase Republican support if it happened.
You can say that, and they've certainly been. That's really the only clear proposals that they've had in this last election cycle is on issues of bigotry.
Yeah.
But it's not working. They're not gaining voters because of their increased bigotry. It's not just a magic wand where you can be like, well, there's a lot of white people in the country and a lot of old people in the country, and therefore we can cobble together a win just by attacking all young, not white people or whatever. It just doesn't work. The demographics, for one, have shifted, and for the other, I think Trump is just not seen as a plausible a vehicle for bigotry either. I really don't think he's seen by people, his supporters necessarily, as a more plausible character in that sense. They're falling away from the Republican Party, even as he's ramping up the racist rhetoric.
I don't know. There's this, like as I mentioned earlier, Trump is a symptom of a broader tendency in some areas of American society that is very, very bigoted, very reactionary. Let's call it alt-right. That's kind of what people have been referring to it as. It's surprising how fast this alt-right thing, like a year ago, nobody really knew what that term meant.
It's a new thing, I guess. The question for me, when it comes to the alt-right in general, is how much of these movements are sound but not substance? I
read a really interesting article. And they went to, I think it was the University of Arizona. No, it was the University of Portland, historically left-wing state, right? And there was an alt-right pro-Trump, pro-wall, make Mexico pay for it rally on the University of Portland's campus. And they interviewed a bunch of the guys that were coming out in support of Trump. And they were all, college students, university students, whatever, from a, very progressive state. And they interviewed one guy in particular who was like a young, early 20-somethings white dude that was spouting off the most eugenic fucking racist bullshit about non-whites breeding faster than whites and all the kind of, he could have taken it out of a 1950s or 40s eugenics textbook, right? And the people writing the article sort of expressed disbelief that this kid grew up in, a lefty on the left coast, Portland, and turned into some right-wing lunatic. But I don't think that he really grew up in Portland. I think he grew up on the internet. A lot of the alt-right movement is really based a lot on the internet and the sort of right-wing racist bullshit on 4chan and whatever that you see.
Well, come on, 4chan. We don't need to go after 4chan. We can just say, well, pick a forum. YouTube comment section. I mean, come on. There is no place.
4chan is an incubator, but I get your point. Because of the nature of the alt-right and sort of how it has its base on the internet, I think it's drawing in a lot of people that wouldn't normally be involved in politics or wouldn't normally support a Democratic or Republican candidate. And the Trump campaign seems to attract every single kind of insane right-wing bullshit person that you can think of, whether it's Alex Jones or David Duke, the KKK, and even I think there was a group called Blacks for Trump that actually think that Oprah is the Antichrist or something like that.
There's also anarchists for Trump as well. He's really cobbled together himself an island of misfit toys for his campaign.
Wow.
Just anyone and everyone who will vote for him. Do it. Fine. Whatever you need to do.
Yeah, it's really crazy to watch it because there's these sort of political fringe groups and organizations that have been on the sidelines for so many years that are now sort of find a campaign that for whatever reason resonates with them. And it's kind of frightening because I think that this is not just going to be this election. There are forces behind the Trump campaign, social forces that will continue. And 4 years down the road, we might get an even more insane person running, or a more...
Yeah, sure.
Actually, not just insane, that would be fine, but someone that's more intelligent than Trump and that can, like, actually organize people effectively, which would be way more scary.
Well, that seems to be the Democratic Party's playbook right now, is that they're the party of reason, they're the party of rational thought, they're the party of, establishment, but in a good way, stability.
Yeah.
All it takes to break that is someone who can just be a better speaker. All it would take, as I said, there are words Trump could say that could get him the presidency.
Yeah.
All it would take now 4 years from now or 8 years from now is just someone perhaps even worse than Trump, but someone who perhaps just has a little bit more charisma, who doesn't have an awful history behind him.
Yeah.
Who is just, a little bit cleaner, a little bit more well-spoken, but just as reprehensible, and they could just blow the Democratic Party out of the water.
Yeah.
Because for all that we can talk about Trump being garbage, and everything he touches turns to garbage, and it's true, it's as much of an indictment of the Democratic Party's candidate as it is of Trump. The fact that you can have a guy this awful still polling 45% says a lot more about the Democratic Party than it does about the Republicans.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, this election was basically Hillary's to lose. There was a lot of momentum behind the Sanders campaign, and I think that I don't know, the bureaucratic forces, the party brass won over that, through manipulation or whatever. But it's disconcerting. I don't know even what to say. Like the whole spectacle, and if Trump loses, which he very well probably will at this point, I suspect that there will be probably riots in the United States of his supporters losing their goddamn minds, because he's been plugging the fact that if he loses, it's going to be rigged, and the whole process is bullshit, and it's going to be rigged, and I think there will be violence.
I don't know. I don't think there will be actual riots. I think the incidence of racially motivated attacks will increase. But to be fair, I think they would have increased in both cases. I mean, if Trump became president, those attacks would definitely be increasing.
It would be like Brexit.
Where the racism associated with the issue ends up finding release regardless of the result.
Yeah.
Right? If it's yes or no, there's more attacks. If it's Clinton or Trump, there's going to probably be more attacks. And so much of this has just been built around this election, built up, associated with this election. And yeah, like you said, the alt-right and a bunch of other random people have sort of cobbled themselves around him. And much like Sanders, much like a lot of the supporters of Sanders, have invested in Trump what it is they want to see.
Yeah.
Trump, I don't think Trump is a KKK member. I don't think he's a fascist. I don't think he's any of the sort of things a lot of his most radical supporters think he is.
Or want him to be.
Yeah, or want him to be. I think he is... well, it's sort of backing up for a moment. Trump, right? Why did he do this? Why did he even bother running at all?
Because he's a narcissistic sociopath.
Sure, but he was a narcissistic sociopath 10 years ago. He doesn't run for president forever. Mitt Romney's been running for president.
He ran last time. Well,
he didn't run. He was just sort of dipping his toes in the water.
No, I mean, he tried to run for the Republican nomination.
But I guess what I'm getting at here, more than just narcissism, is what is Trump's goal more than just aggrandizing himself? Because if that's it, then he's done a really bad job of it. To be honest, a year ago, and I think most Americans probably could say they had a better appreciation for him than they do now.
Yeah.
I mean, a year ago, he was a celebrity. His sexism and goonishness was a character he put on. As far as we were concerned, it was just something he did to to sell TV slots. But as it turns out, actually, that is just who he is. Now we know that, and we think he's kind of a piece of shit. But what I'm getting at here, whatever.
He's a massive piece of shit.
He's a gigantic dump upon humanity that we will not be able to get out from under. Whatever. The Trump, though, what is his goal as president? You can talk about walls and building of things and fucking over China and Japan like it's the 1980s still. All that is still true. But I guess I still can't quite see what it is that he's actually trying to do. as president. Like, why he finds this the thing that's worth his time.
I think you're overthinking it, like, by a huge margin. I think literally he's just a narcissist and a sociopath.
And he's just found himself.
He wants power. He thinks he's the greatest. He's the best. Why not be president?
He just happened to sort of, like, there was a lot of that anti-establishment sentiment, and it just sort of coalesced around him, and it's just sort of carried him to where he is now. Is that it?
Yeah.
Is that really it? I mean, is that...
Yes.
Is that Trump?
Yes.
That's his election.
That's it.
Oh, God, I wish there was something more to it than that. I don't want to be a fucking conspiracy theorist here, but by God, I wish there was some kind of plan in place. I wish there had been some kind of purpose to all of this.
No, Trump...
The idea that Clinton and Trump would be the two candidates, and all it would really come down to is Clinton basically just redoing her election from 8 years ago, and Trump just kind of stumbling his way into the spotlight, and that's it.
No, I think that literally is it.
I'm sorry, but that's not good enough for me.
Okay, when Trump talks about Mexicans being rapists and whatever, I think he's literally just, like, spouting off shit that he thinks people will want to hear, and if he gets big cheers from them, then he says more of the same thing. But at the core, he just thinks that, like, being president would acknowledge how great he actually is. And that he is just, like, he deserves it.
Yeah.
Because he's so smart, he's so good, and he's so wonderful.
Best. Everyone
he's the
knows
best.
it.
Everyone knows it. Everyone agrees.
Crap.
And just the fact that, like, so much of his behavior has exposed him as being a complete fucking simpleton. You know.
I know. Well, like I was saying, you know, I thought... I don't think I was alone in this. You know, a year ago or 2 years ago, you look at Trump and say... He's an asshole, but that's his job. He's a career asshole.
Yeah.
In his personal life, surely he's just a normal guy who doesn't care. He's a reality TV host. Everybody knows that's all fake. As it turns out, that is actually exactly how deep he is as a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm dissatisfied with that, but I guess maybe I just shouldn't be. It just fits too well.
What, you were expecting more from that man?
I wasn't expecting more from Trump so much as I was just thinking, you know, he's a fucking human being. Surely there's a point in his life, there's a point in the last year where he has just thought to himself, you know, there's a real chance I could be president, so I need to take this shit seriously. Trump might just be in a class of his own. It's just still, even now, and I think, you know, for perhaps the rest of my life, I will still look at him and say, there's got to be more to this. There's got to be some fucking puzzle piece that makes sense of this.
No, he's, like, what you see is what you get. This is him.
Yeah, all right. Well, I mean, that's Trump, but back to Clinton, because we have been harping on Trump quite a bit. And the question I want to ask you, Ben, is what do you think a Clinton presidency will look like? Since Trump, at this point, is implausible to the point of who gives a shit. Clinton's going to win. That's just what's going to happen. God knows how the House and Senate will go. Who cares? Presidency of Clinton. She's going to win. What do you think that's going to look like?
I think it will be very similar to the Obama administration in terms of drone strikes, the persecution of journalists, and the signing of pro-corporate trade policies the world over. I think that she will probably take things to a higher level than Barack has. And by higher, I don't mean in a good way, but in a more Nixon-esque, secretive, and aggressive way.
Yeah.
I think that she will probably be very secretive and hawkish and basically take the groundwork that Obama has laid and use it to advance American imperial interests the world over. But like Obama and Bush, find her plans stymied by the fact that America is weaker in the world than it has been in a long time and isn't fully capable of asserting its imperialist interests.
Well, you know, you gave the political science answer.
Okay,
I suppose, and I completely agree. But I guess I'm saying, you know, this has been an election about feelings, not about reason.
Fuck feelings. I don't care. I want to know what their
feel about the Clinton presidency. Okay, fine. I'll tell you what I think.
Okay.
a Clinton presidency will probably more than likely provide her with, and provide the Democratic Party and provide America, ultimately, I guess is the point, with a cover to do what they've been doing before. I think a Clinton presidency will probably just be, like you said, similar to Barack Obama, but I think there will be a major difference, and that's that I think Clinton is much better connected than Obama was, and will probably be, at least on the surface, much more, quote, effective as president than he was.
Right.
She is definitely way better at managing media and, controlling discourse on political affairs than Obama was. He had to rely on other people basically to do that for him, but she's just so well entrenched into the establishment that, it's going to, at least on the face of it, be an amazing presidency with no real negatives at all. She's going to be, I wouldn't even go for, you mentioned Nixon. I would say, fuck Nixon. She's a fucking Frank Underwood, if she's anyone.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like, this is a presidency that will be inscrutable. I don't think there will be any punches pulled when it comes to the Clinton presidency. Well, quote, the second Clinton presidency, obviously. Right. That Hillary Clinton will unleash the full force of that she has been sort of marshaling behind her throughout this whole process. So the last 16 years, let's not forget, that she is not simply the establishment candidate. This is not simply a coronation. This is the fulfillment of decades of work. Decades of promises, agreements, trades, backroom deals.
But I see Clinton as being a complete tool of American capitalist and imperialist interests.
Sure.
It's not like she has plans to change anything but further American interests worldwide.
Okay, fine. But from the point of view of, appearances, from the point of view of what we will hear about the presidency probably through its entire existence, it's going to be golden. It's going to be a golden age for American imperialism.
But that golden age will mask the sort of rotting core of America, where their educational systems are not working at all. Their infrastructure is crumbling. They don't have enough. The American society and the economy of America is slowly withering.
Yeah.
And with it, America's place in the world. And I think that Hillary Clinton belongs to a time that no longer really exists. And I think that she will try to advance ideals and policies that can't be enforced in the world. America is not as capable of asserting itself as it was in times past. And I think that Hillary Clinton, in her mind, lives in a world where America can do those things. But this is the era of America in decline. And you have...
Well, perhaps. Yes, I agree. At least when it comes to the Middle East, Russia is managing to hit them tit for tat now.
And China.
China, too. Well, fine. But when we're talking about America, the, world police, or America, the defenders of freedom everywhere and always, they're still on top. They're still the best. They have resources and money and influence that those other countries have had to tap into already. Like that, the decline of American imperialism is a deep well that I think, in the course of 8 years of a Clinton presidency, Hillary Clinton will be able to tap into as much as she wants or needs to maintain the facade of strength and power. I don't think that there's any need on her part as president to look weak, ever. It might happen. Accidents and incidents do occur that might undermine the facade, I guess, as it were. But realistically, I think that if Clinton is elected, we're looking at a period of time in which we have a kind of a return to form of American imperialism.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that Clinton would she would resort to the old tactics of American empire and imperialism to assert America's will across the world, because she is a hawk and she doesn't seem to be afraid to use force when necessary or not necessary. But like I said before, like I think America is now in a position where it finds itself slowly declining in its ability to assert itself on the world stage. So regardless as to whether or not Clinton is willing to use whatever power is available to her to assert America's interests, I think there will be it will sometimes backfire. There will be unintended consequences that they can't control, and other unexpected things that will happen. So I think that it will be interesting if that does happen, because I think that more than anyone, Clinton would probably try to assert herself on the world stage and fail. So do you think the American people and the world deserve Trump, Mac?
Well, I mean, you could just as easily ask whether we deserve Clinton or Bush or Obama or anyone else. But Trump is definitely the, cause célèbre, I guess. Do we deserve Trump? Does the world deserve Trump? Does America deserve Trump? I don't know. Clinton has certainly talked a lot about how it's not how we are. Trump, it doesn't represent America, or it's, whatever variation on that theme you want to make. But if we're talking about the sexism, then yeah, it kind of does. Racism, certainly. He is just as racist, if not less than, most Americans. If the presidency is supposed to be representative of a country, just in like a really basic sense, then yeah, they deserve Trump, as far as I'm concerned. But does the world? Fuck no. And does the American people need him? Fuck no. He's not a good president. I mean, at the end of the day, we can talk about how Clinton would be a warmonger and Trump would be a fucking disaster. And in both cases, all I can say is I don't think either of them is a good candidate. And since the third parties are all fucking garbage anyway, there is no option I can look to say, here's the good thing. So, of course, it inevitably comes back to, well, it's either Hillary or Trump. Who do you want more? Who do you think we deserve more?
Who do you hate less?
I think in kind of like a poetic way, maybe they deserve Trump. Maybe it should just happen. I mean, if the Clinton presidency occurs, and that seems most likely, very likely, then I think the Trump phenomenon will just happen again, and will keep happening until either there is a legitimate alternative to the two-party system, or a Trump or Trump-like character wins. It just seems like that's sort of the trend. Like, it will inevitably happen that people will become so pissed off, so disenchanted with the establishment, with whatever, that they'll just vote in a disaster and hope that, like a tornado, he'll tear down the buildings we want to see get torn down, not everything. And to be honest, it's not an unrealistic hope, but I think it is ultimately derives from a kind of a hopelessness, ultimately, like that there just is no other option, so we might as well just expect Trump to just do something that will get us where we want to go.
I think you're right. I think that there needs to be a fundamental change in American society and the way that their country works. And I think that the longer that they continue to let the contradictions continue, that you're going to see more and more radical and racist and misogynistic movements continue to gain footholds in mainstream American society.